This might be a weird way to start a piece of content, but does your life ever feel a little bit like a party that you got invited to by one person, but when you show up to that party, that one person who invited you isn't actually there, and all the people who are there either don't know you or don't like you? Or maybe a simpler way of saying that is, do you ever feel like you're not really supposed to be on Earth with all the other humans? Like this just isn't a place where you belong. I know that I have felt that way most of my life. In most of the spaces I've been in, I have felt like I was somewhere between an unwanted intruder and like a barely tolerated unwanted guest. And most of the man made world has always kind of felt oppressive and aversive to me. With just really a few key exceptions, I don't generally enjoy the experience of being around other people. I can play the social game and act the way I know I'm supposed to act, but most of the time it kind of just feels like I'm going through the motions or like I'm an actor playing a role. And it's not a role that I usually find terribly meaningful or enjoyable. I've also always been hyper aware of what I consider to be the flaws or the inconsistencies in our society and in the ways that people act. And I don't do this on purpose, which I think if you relate to me at all on this, I think it's a very misunderstood thing, is people think that we are just trying to find everything we don't like about life. I actually try really hard not to do it because I know that it makes me insufferable to be around to most human beings. But it's just like an automatic process. I just feel like my brain cannot help it. And just to give you an example of what I mean, I don't understand the situations in which we do and don't, quote, cancel people. Like, why is it that if you make a statement that might be considered hateful towards a specific group of people, you basically get wiped off the face of the earth? But if you make a song about murdering someone, not only is that fine, you can become like a meme for elementary school aged children. And just to be clear, I don't think it's okay to hate people based on what group they belong to. I just think it's even less okay to kill them. But society seems to have decided that it's completely acceptable to glorify killing people in cold blood as long as you don't call them mean names. That's one of about a billion examples I could have chosen, and in all honesty, probably the worst example I could have chosen because I have a feeling someone's going to clip that and somehow spin it as Dr. Scott is pro-hate speech, which is not the case, but maybe I should have chosen a different example. It is too late now. I'll explain that later. For all the reasons I just said, and frankly, many more that I probably don't have time to get into today, I have struggled with suicidal ideation for much of my life. Existence itself just really doesn't seem to feel inherently good to me. Parts of it do, certainly. Like, there have been things I've done in periods of time in my life and places in my life that are wonderful and that I'm so deeply appreciative of being able to experience. But my average attitude towards being alive on this earth when nothing is really happening to pull me in one direction or another is typically somewhere between ambivalence and disinterest. Like, I just have a really hard time wanting to stay here sometimes. And I know that when the intensity of a person's emotions kind of reaches a boiling point, like when you've been dealing with feelings like that for a long, long time, whether it's rage, isolation, hopelessness, terror, or all of the above, it is very natural to want to do something drastic. Big feelings logically seem like they should lead to big actions. And this, I think, is where we lose people to suicide. Because in some ways, suicide is the biggest, air quote, thing a person can do. Or at least it can really feel that way when you're in the depths of depression and hopelessness and despair. It can feel like it is the ultimate act of defiance and rebellion. You know, it's almost like you're saying to the world, okay, I get it. You don't want me here? Fine, I will leave. Like, I wasn't supposed to be at this party. I'll get out of here. I'll leave you alone. I get it. But no matter how a person chooses to do it, it's a violent exit. It is the taking of a human life. And the fact that the life in question happens to be your own does not make that any less true. It is a violent act. The coping skills that are often proposed as antidotes for suicidal ideation rarely seem like an appropriate match in intensity to me. I am not about to be hyperbolic here. I'm going to tell you some actual things, obviously confidentially, anonymously, actual things my clients have told me that they have heard in response to expressing suicidal ideation, not just from friends and family, but from therapists or even crisis line workers. They have been told to do things like go for a walk, text a friend, or take a nap. Like, I hope you can see how incredibly mismatched these responses are with the stimuli. Like, I am so hurt, so upset, so hopeless that I am literally considering murdering myself to make the pain stop. And your response is, have you thought about also sleeping during part of the day? It enrages me just to repeat those stories. And this is part of why I think people complete suicide. Because when you are that fed up, that frustrated, that hurt, and that disenchanted about your ongoing existence, you feel like you have to make the biggest move on the table. And I think that dying often feels like a bigger move than continuing to live. I thought that for a long time too, but I don't anymore. I have completely switched sides on this issue. I've always been the kind of person who hates to give up on anything before I feel like I've actually really tried everything. Like, I want to know there was no way this was going to work out. It wasn't due to my lack of effort or my lack of skill. Like, this was impossible, and it just wasn't going to work from the start. And I knew that if I could not honestly say to myself that I had tried everything to make this life work, I wouldn't be able to go through with anything. I felt so much ambivalence towards my own existence that I had never made anything resembling a commitment to it. It had always just been kind of like, I'm here. It's fine. It's whatever. I had always had one foot out the door in my own life, basically. Like, knowing that I had what seemed like a pretty solid backup plan if things got too bad, which was to not be here anymore. But the thing about having a backup plan, you need to hear this if you've ever struggled with suicidal ideation. The problem with having a backup plan is that it negatively affects your ability to fully commit to and experience the main plan. You can never be all in on plan A when you have a plan B. That's part of the problem. When I was the closest that I personally have ever been to suicide, I knew that there was only one plausible alternative for me. If I was going to try to make myself want to live, I was going to have to put all of the rage and the disenchantment and the intensity that was making me want to die into my efforts to attempt to want to live. I hope that made sense. In other words, I knew that I would have to make a violent commitment to staying alive. It could not be some weak little half-hearted attempt. I was too far gone for that. I still wanted to take all of the pent-up feelings inside of me and let them out in a very visible way. I just wanted to do that through life instead of death. And so I made a decision. I made a commitment. I decided to give myself 5 years. And I said, I'm going to put everything I have into life. I am not going to hold back. I am not going to be half-hearted. I am not going to be ambivalent. I am going to be all in for 5 years. That seemed like a reasonable trial period to me. I would not entertain any thoughts of suicide for this 5-year period. That doesn't mean I didn't have them. I'll talk more about that in a second. It means I didn't entertain them. There's a difference between having a thought and entertaining a thought. You only have control over one of them. Because I knew that until I took the option of death off the table, I wouldn't be able to experience what it felt like to actually live. Remember, you can't fully experience plan A when you still have a plan B. You can't. You won't be all in on it. It's kind of funny, slight digression, but much later in life, like 2 years ago, I heard this exact same principle expressed about something completely different, because it was about a couple of years ago that I was trying to decide if I should start my own business or not, and whether or not I should stay partially employed at my previous employer while I started my own business as a safety net, basically. And pretty much every piece of entrepreneurial advice I read said, do not do that, because you won't be able to put everything you have into starting this business if you're also employed. Well, because A, you'll have less time and energy, but B, you will know that you don't have to make this business work because you still have an income even if this business does not work. And as soon as it gets hard, you'll just give up. And that, when I heard that advice, A, it motivated me business-wise, but B, I was like, that's literally what I did for half my life. Because I had another option, as soon as anything was unpleasant or challenging or anything I didn't want it to be, I was just like, I just won't do this for much longer then. I'll just quit. I'll just give up. Because I had another choice. And when I took that choice off the table, everything changed. I made a conscious decision to burn the ships of my own suicidal ideation. If you don't know what I mean by burning the ships, I don't know exactly what time era it's from, but it's from the period of time when countries were warring. They had to cross oceans with ships, right? So you had to get to your enemy by boat. It's kind of an awkward thing if you think about it. Like, we're going to war, let's go. I know they didn't actually paddle the boats, but anyway, just put a funny image in my head. I don't know why. And, so you'd get to this foreign country where you're going to battle these hated enemies or whatever. And I'm sure that in that situation, you'd have a lot of ambivalence and a lot of fear. And a part of you would be like, I think I'm just going to go back on the boat and hide or steal a boat and go home. And so sometimes in very, very extreme circumstances, I think this was a real thing that happened and not just a myth. You history buffs can let me know if this actually happened, but they would literally burn the ships so they couldn't go home. So it's like, we are stuck here. We are stranded in this strange place, and our only choices are to win or to die, basically. Like, there's no exit plan. There's no way out. We have to fight now. And I would imagine that would take ambivalence off the table for anyone who had mixed feelings about it at that point. Because there's literally no other choice. Like, you had to cross an ocean to get to your enemy, and now you don't have a ship, so you can't recross the ocean. That's what I decided to do. I burned the ships of my plan B, and I decided to make a violent commitment to living by setting fire to my only option for escape. I trapped myself here, and I decided to use all of my rage and all of my frustration to work on building something resembling a life for myself that I didn't completely despise. Now, following up on my little cliffhanger earlier, let me be clear. Making a conscious decision to take suicide off the menu, so to speak, doesn't stop your brain from thinking about it. I'm not saying that the second you decide to do, whether yours is a 5-year commitment or whatever, that your brain's going to instantly play along and be like, oh, okay, you will hear no more from me on that matter for 5 years. That'd be cool if it worked that way. It doesn't. It won't. You'll still think about it. But this is what I was saying before. There's a difference between having a thought and consciously engaging with the thought. Your brain thinks of weird crap all day long. And a lot of it you don't engage with because you're like, brain, that's weird. No, let's not do that. But some of the thoughts you have, you're like, ooh, let's think about that. Let's talk about that. You kind of dialogue with it, right? You kind of play along. You're like, what do you think about this? Should we do this? And you really kind of keep it in the forefront of your consciousness for a while. That's what I mean by entertaining a thought. And that is something you can consciously choose not to do. It's kind of like your YouTube algorithm. Like when you got on YouTube today, if you went to your homepage, there's probably 6-9 different videos or whatever. You can't control what videos are there. You can change it over time, I know, but you can't just make it not be there. But you do choose which one to click on. That's what I'm talking about with conscious engagement. You can make a conscious choice. You can do this with anything. This is just the topic I happen to be discussing it with today. You can make a conscious decision not to engage with any particular type of thought. You can. And it will keep it just under the surface for however long you choose to follow that with. Basically, I just pre-decided not to do it. And so every time my mind reminded me of that option, I basically just said no. Not to make it sound overly simplified, but that's really 100% what I did. That was it. I set a boundary, and I did not cross that boundary. And when that option was off the table, my ambivalence was 95% gone. And anytime my mind would ask the question, is it really worth it to do XYZ thing? It was a pretty easy answer. His answer is yes, because I'm stuck here. I'm trapped in this place that I don't always understand, and that I don't always like, and that I don't always feel like I belong in or am a part of. So yeah, I'd better do all the things that are going to make me hate it less. And what those things were, that changed year to year or even month to month. But most of it was just basic life stuff. The stuff you struggle with every day. Should I really get up out of bed? Should I go to school? Should I go to work? Should I talk to that girl? Should I hang out with my friends? Should I shower? Should I make dinner? And suddenly, my answer to the questions for such a long time was like, I don't know, who cares? It doesn't matter. It all became yes, because I am stuck here, because I have to make the most of it, because what else am I going to do? There was no option B. Just like with this business, I don't wonder, should I go try to make money at my business today? Yeah, I will starve if I don't. So yes, I should. It's the same kind of thing. It's being all in and taking every option off the table except the one that you really hope will work out. Even if you're not sure that it will work out. Everyone would do this. It would take no courage to commit to life if you were 100% positive that it could turn around, that it could get better. That choice did not magically solve all my problems. It didn't. I'm not trying to sell you guys magic beans here. I'm not trying to sell you anything. This is an unsponsored piece of content, in fact. But that decision did put me in a position that allowed my problems to be solved. Because when you don't care, when you don't commit, they won't get any better if you got one foot out the door. I truly believe that I would not be here today if I wasn't able to see things in that way. And I hope that by sharing my experience with you, maybe I can help you do the same. Maybe you can find your own similar turning point in this weird mess of a life that we're all stumbling our way through. I hope this helps. I'll see you later. Take care.